The morning sun had barely risen over JFK International Airport when Officer James Murphy's day started going wrong. At 6:30 a.m., he spilled hot coffee on his new uniform shirt. By 7 o'clock a.m., his radio stopped working. Now, at 8:15 a.m., he stood in Terminal 4, watching hundreds of angry passengers yell about their cancelled flights. Murphy was a simple man who liked simple things. At 45 years old, with graying hair at his temples and a small potbelly he couldn't get rid of, he had spent 15 years keeping peace at one of America's busiest airports. He wasn't the smartest cop or the strongest, but he knew how to handle angry travelers. At least, that's what he thought until today. "Sir, please step back from the counter," he shouted for the 10th time that morning. Another angry businessman was leaning over the Delta Airlines desk, his face red with anger. Murphy sighed as he guided the man away. 3 flights to Europe had been cancelled due to bad weather, and the replacement flights were all full. The terminal looked like a war zone. Suitcases were scattered everywhere. Children were crying on the floor. Old ladies were fanning themselves with magazines, and businessmen were shouting into their phones. The air conditioning wasn't working right, making everything feel worse. Sarah Chen, the young airline worker at Counter 6, caught Murphy's eye and waved him over. She looked stressed, her usual neat hair coming loose from its bun. "Officer Murphy," she whispered when he reached her, "I think we might need extra help today. I've never seen it this bad." Murphy nodded, pulling out his phone to call for backup, but before he could dial, his phone died. Of course it did. Everything was going wrong today. He walked to the staff break room to use the landline, but the door was locked. Someone had changed the code without telling him. Back in the terminal, things were getting worse. The coffee shop had run out of coffee. The bathroom in Section B was flooding. And now, a group of strange-looking men in identical black suits was walking through the main entrance. Murphy watched them carefully. Something about them seemed off. The men moved in a tight formation, like they were protecting something or someone. They were all Asian, all wearing sunglasses despite being indoors, and all looking very serious. In the middle of their group, Murphy could see someone smaller, but he couldn't make out who it was. His radio crackled to life suddenly, making him jump. "All units, be advised. We have a VIP arrival in Terminal 4. Repeat, VIP arrival in Terminal 4. All units maintain normal patrol but stay alert." Murphy frowned. Nobody had told him about any VIP visits today. Usually, they got briefed about important people coming through. He watched as the group in black suits moved toward the priority check-in counter where Sarah was working. The crowd of regular passengers didn't seem to notice anything unusual. They were too busy with their own problems. A baby started crying nearby, and Murphy turned to help the mother find a quiet place to sit. When he looked back at the priority counter, he saw the group of men had spread out a bit. In the center of their formation stood a short man in what looked like an old-fashioned black suit. His hair was cut in a strange style Murphy had never seen before, and he was talking to Sarah in broken English. Murphy couldn't hear what they were saying, but Sarah looked confused and nervous. The air in the terminal felt different now, tense in a new way. Murphy's 15 years of experience told him something big was about to happen. He just didn't know what. As he watched, the short man's voice got louder, and his hand movements became more aggressive. Murphy started walking toward the counter. His boots squeaked on the shiny floor, and sweat rolled down his back. The air conditioning chose that moment to make a loud clicking sound and stop completely. In a hot, crowded terminal, with hundreds of angry passengers behind him and this mysterious group in front of him, Officer James Murphy was about to make the biggest mistake of his life. Sarah Chen's hands were shaking as she tried to explain the situation to the short man in the black Mao suit. The computer system was down, and she couldn't access any flight information. But the man didn't seem to understand, or maybe he didn't want to understand. "Passport showing important person," he said in broken English, tapping a dark red diplomatic passport on the counter. "Must go now. No waiting." Behind him, his group of men in black suits shifted uncomfortably. They kept looking around the terminal like they were expecting trouble. The short man's face was round, with smooth skin that looked like it had never seen a day of hard work. His hair was cut in a peculiar style, shaved on the sides and flat on top. A small gold pin on his collar sparkled under the terminal lights. Everything about him screamed important, but Sarah had no idea who he was. "I'm very sorry, sir," she said again, speaking slowly and clearly. Our system is down. I cannot check anyone in right now. She looked desperately at the men in black suits, hoping one of them might translate. They'd all stared straight ahead, pretending not to notice her plea for help. The man's face turned red. He started speaking rapidly in Korean to his entourage. One of the men in suits, taller than the others and wearing round glasses, stepped forward nervously. Supreme Leader says this is unacceptable, he translated. We have very important meeting. Must leave now. Supreme Leader? Sarah's mind raced. She had seen something on the news recently about a Korean leader, but she couldn't remember the details. Before she could think more about it, the short man slammed his hand on the counter, making her jump. You not understand, he shouted, his voice getting louder. I am very important person. This is American incompetence. Other passengers were starting to stare now. The men in black suits looked increasingly nervous, their hands moving toward their jackets in a way that made Sarah very uncomfortable. A young couple nearby started filming with their phones. The short man noticed and became even angrier. No pictures, he yelled, pointing at them. Two of his guards immediately moved toward the couple, who quickly put their phones away and hurried off. The air in the terminal felt electric now. Other airline staff were watching nervously. The group of men in black suits had formed a tight circle around their angry leader, but they seemed unsure what to do. They couldn't force the computer system to work, but they also appeared afraid to disagree with the shouting man. Maybe we wait, Supreme Leader, the translator suggested quietly. The short man spun around and barked something in Korean that made the translator step back quickly, bowing repeatedly in apology. Sarah watched as the man's face grew darker with rage. He was switching between Korean and broken English now, his voice getting louder with each word. You not know me? You not know who I am? This is big mistake, very big mistake. The terminal had gone strangely quiet. Other passengers had backed away, leaving an empty circle around the check-in counter. The only sounds were the angry man's voice and the nervous shuffling of his guards' feet. Officer Murphy was getting closer now, moving through the crowd with purpose. Sarah tried to catch his eye, to wave him away. Something told her this situation needed diplomatic security, not a regular airport cop. But Murphy was focused entirely on the shouting man, his face set in the determined expression she had seen many times before when he was about to handle a difficult passenger. The short man suddenly reached across the counter, grabbing for Sarah's computer keyboard. I show you who I am, he yelled. His guards looked horrified but seemed too afraid to physically stop him. Sarah stumbled backward, her chair rolling away. The man was half climbing onto her counter now, his expensive black suit getting wrinkled. That little gold pin still glinting under the lights. As Officer Murphy got closer, she saw him reach for the angry man's shoulder, and she knew with horrible certainty that something very, very bad was about to happen. Time seemed to slow down as Officer Murphy covered the last few steps to the check-in counter. In his 15 years at JFK, he had broken up hundreds of arguments between angry passengers and airline staff. This would be just another story to tell at the bar after work, or so he thought. Sir, Murphy's voice boomed across the terminal. Step back from the counter now. The short man in the black suit either didn't hear him or chose to ignore him. He was still half climbing over the counter, his expensive shoes scuffing the polished surface. Murphy noticed several strange things at once. First, none of the men in black suits were trying to stop their angry friend, even though they looked terrified. Second, they'd all had small earpieces, like Secret Service agents. Third, some of them had their hands inside their jackets, which made Murphy's cop instincts scream danger. But it was too late to stop now. Murphy had already committed to handling the situation. The angry man was reaching for Sarah, who was backed against the wall, her eyes wide with fear. That was all Murphy needed to see. Last warning, Murphy shouted. The short man turned his head slightly, face red with rage, and spat out something in Korean. The translator started to speak. Officer, please, this is Supreme Lee. But Murphy wasn't listening anymore. He had seen that look in passengers' eyes before, the one that said they were about to do something stupid. His body moved on autopilot, years of training taking over. His right hand curled into a fist. The punch wasn't fancy. It wasn't like in the movies where time slows down and you see every detail. It was quick, simple, and effective, just like they taught in the police academy. Murphy's fist connected with the man's jaw with a solid thud. The short man's eyes went wide with surprise. His small gold pin flew off his collar and skittered across the floor. For a moment, he stood perfectly still, as if his brain couldn't process what had just happened. Then, like a tree falling in slow motion, he toppled backward into the arms of his shocked guards. The next 10 seconds were pure chaos. The men in black suits erupted into action, moving with military precision. Some formed a protective circle around their fallen leader. Others drew weapons, actual automatic weapons, from inside their jackets. Two of them grabbed Murphy's arms and slammed him face first onto the counter. Screams erupted throughout the terminal. Passengers ran in all directions, dropping their luggage and diving behind columns. Sarah ducked under her desk, her hands covering her head. The terminal's security alarm started blaring, its harsh sound mixing with the shouts in Korean and English. "Do not move," one of the guards yelled in Murphy's ear, pressing him harder against the counter. "Do not even breathe." Murphy could feel cold metal against the back of his neck, the barrel of a gun. On the floor, the short man was being helped up by his guards. His perfect hair was messed up now, and a red mark was forming on his jaw. He touched his face carefully, looking at his fingers as if expecting to see blood. Then he said something in Korean that made all his guards freeze. The translator, who had backed against the wall, stepped forward nervously. Supreme Leader asks, "Why did no one tell them American police hit so hard?" There was a strange tone in the translator's voice. Was that fear or amusement? Murphy, still pinned to the counter, felt someone take his gun and handcuffs. More people were running into the terminal now, real Secret Service agents, FBI agents, and airport security. They'd all stopped dead when they saw the scene. An FBI agent in a dark suit walked up, looked at the short man being helped to his feet, and turned pale. "Oh my God," he whispered. "Officer, you have any idea who you just punched?" Murphy, his face still pressed against the cold counter, had a sinking feeling in his stomach. The pieces were finally coming together: the diplomatic passport, the guards, the weapons, the title Supreme Leader. He closed his eyes and wished desperately that he'd called in sick today. A voice from the back of the crowd said what everyone was thinking. "That's Kim Jong-un. He just punched Kim Jong-un." The terminal fell into an eerie silence. The only sounds were the quiet whimpers of Kim Jong-un's translator, who looked like he might faint at any moment, and the distant wail of police sirens getting closer. Officer Murphy remained pressed against the counter, wondering if this was all just a bad dream. "Get the terminal evacuated," someone whispered urgently. Now, security officers began herding shocked passengers toward the exits. People walked backward as they left, phones held high, trying to capture every moment of the unfolding disaster. The North Korean guards were surprisingly gentle as they helped their leader to a nearby chair. Kim Jong-un sat there, touching his jaw with a look of complete disbelief on his face. No one had ever dared to lay a hand on him before. The small gold pin that had fallen from his collar, a pin showing the faces of his father and grandfather, lay forgotten on the floor. FBI agent David Wilson took charge of the situation. He was a tall man with gray hair and the tired look of someone who had seen too many crises. "Nobody moves," he announced. "Nobody calls anyone. Nobody posts anything on social media." He looked at his watch and grimaced. "We have maybe 5 minutes before this hits Twitter and all hell breaks loose." The North Korean translator stepped forward, sweating profusely. "Supreme Leader wishes to know," he said in a shaky voice, "if this is how America typically welcomes foreign dignitaries." His attempt at translating Kim's sarcasm came out more like a desperate plea. Murphy, finally allowed to stand up but with 2 FBI agents holding his arms, tried to explain. "I thought he was attacking the airline staff," he said weakly. "I was just doing my job. How was I supposed to know it was Kim Jong-un? He wasn't even supposed to be here." Agent Wilson rubbed his temples. "He wasn't," he confirmed. "This was an unscheduled stop. His private jet needed emergency maintenance. It was supposed to be completely secret." He glared at Murphy. "Do you have any idea what you've just done?" Before Murphy could answer, something unexpected happened. Kim Jong-un started laughing. It began as a small chuckle, then grew into a full belly laugh. Everyone in the terminal froze, unsure how to react. The North Korean guards looked at each other nervously. They had never seen their leader laugh like this. Through the translator, Kim explained what he found so amusing. In North Korea, the translator said, still trembling, Supreme Leader's security would have shot any man who came within 10 feet of him. But American police officer. He paused as Kim spoke again. American police officer uses his fists, like action movie hero. The tension in the terminal shifted slightly. Agent Wilson seized the moment. Supreme Leader, he said carefully, on behalf of the United States government, I want to express our deepest. But Kim waved him off, still chuckling and rubbing his jaw. He spoke again, and the translator's eyes widened in surprise as he translated. Supreme Leader says Officer Murphy is either very brave or very stupid. He wishes to know which. Murphy, who had been wondering the same thing himself, answered honestly. Probably both, sir. When this was translated, Kim laughed again. Sarah Chen, who had been watching everything from behind her counter, finally spoke up. I tried to tell Officer Murphy who you were, she said quietly, but everything happened so fast. Kim turned to look at her, then at Murphy, then at the chaos around them, the scattered luggage, the frightened airline staff, the armed guards, the FBI agents talking urgently into their phones. He said something long in Korean, gesturing at Murphy as he spoke. The translator hesitated before translating. Supreme Leader says, he has been surrounded by people who bow and say yes to everything for so long, he had forgotten what it feels like to be treated like a normal person. He paused. Even if that treatment included a punch to the face. Agent Wilson's phone buzzed. He looked at it and his face went pale. It's too late, he announced. We're trending on Twitter. #Kapuncheskim is already the #1 hashtag worldwide. Murphy closed his eyes and wondered if Alaska needed any airport security officers. Somewhere very, very far from international terminals. By midnight, the small security office at JFK Airport had become the center of an international crisis. Officer Murphy sat in a corner, drinking his 6th cup of coffee, while important people in expensive suits rushed in and out of the room talking on phones. The American Secretary of State had been woken up at 3 a.m. in Washington. She was now on a huge video screen on the wall, looking tired and angry. Let me get this straight, she said, rubbing her eyes. One of our police officers punched the Supreme Leader of North Korea because of a customer service dispute. To be fair, Murphy spoke up. He was getting aggressive with the airline staff. Everyone in the room turned to glare at him. He sank lower in his chair and decided to stop talking. The video screen split into 4 parts now. The Secretary of State was joined by the National Security Advisor, the Director of the FBI, and someone from the CIA whose face was hidden in shadows. They all looked like they hadn't slept in days, even though this crisis was only 6 hours old. The North Korean media is already running with this, the CIA person said. On another screen, they showed clips from North Korean TV. The news there was telling a very different story. According to them, Officer Murphy was a trained CIA assassin who had tried to kill their beloved leader. Agent Wilson stepped forward with some papers. It gets worse, he said. The video is everywhere. Someone posted it on TikTok, and it has 50 million views already. People are making memes about it. There's even a song remix going viral. He showed them his phone, where a video played showing Murphy's punch perfectly synchronized to the beat of a popular dance song. The Secretary of State put her head in her hands. Meanwhile, in Pyongyang, North Korea's capital city, huge crowds had gathered in the main square. They were waving signs with Murphy's face crossed out and shouting angry slogans. The North Korean army had moved some missiles to the coast, pointing them toward America. Back in the security office, Murphy's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. His sister had texted him, "Oh, Jimmy, you're famous. Mom's worried sick, but Dad says this is the coolest thing anyone in our family has ever done." The National Security Advisor was talking about evacuation plans for American citizens in South Korea when suddenly, everyone's phone started beeping at once. Kim Jong-un had just posted a message on North Korea's official government website. The translator, who hadn't left Murphy's side since the incident, read it out loud. Supreme Leader says that this attack proves America's hostile intentions. He demands Officer Murphy be sent to North Korea for trial, or there will be serious consequences. Well, that's not happening, the Secretary of State said firmly. Officer Murphy acted as a law enforcement officer protecting airline staff. We don't send our citizens to North Korea for trial. Just then, Sarah Chen knocked on the security office door. She looked nervous but determined. "Excuse me," she said, holding up her phone. "But you all need to see this." She showed them a new video that was going viral in Asia. It showed the moments before the punch from a different angle. In this video, you could clearly see Kim Jong-un smiling slightly just before Murphy hit him, almost like he was enjoying the confrontation. The CIA person leaned forward, interested. "This changes things," they said. "If we can prove Kim was deliberately causing a scene." But before they could finish, another message came from North Korea. This one was different. Kim Jong-un had posted a photo of himself holding an ice pack to his jaw, giving a thumbs up to the camera. The caption read, "American police very strong. Good training." Nobody knew what to make of this. Was he mocking them? Was it a threat? Was he actually impressed? The room full of important people fell silent, trying to figure out what game the North Korean leader was playing. Murphy looked at his empty coffee cup and wondered if the airport Starbucks was still open. Something told him this was going to be a very long night. 3 days after the punch that shook international relations, Officer James Murphy sat in the break room at JFK Airport, staring at a very strange letter. It had arrived on fancy paper with gold edges and North Korean government stamps all over it. "Are you sure this isn't a joke?" he asked Agent Wilson, who stood nearby looking equally confused. The FBI agent shook his head and pointed to the official seals and signatures at the bottom of the page. The letter, translated from Korean to English, was even more surprising than its fancy appearance. Kim Jong-un wasn't demanding Murphy's arrest anymore. Instead, he was inviting him to North Korea, not as a prisoner, but as a guest. "Supreme Leader is most impressed," the translator read from the letter, "by Officer Murphy's dedication to duty. In North Korea, such loyalty to job is highest virtue." The translator adjusted his glasses and continued reading. "Supreme Leader wishes to learn more about American police training methods. Perhaps Officer Murphy would demonstrate proper punching technique." Sarah Chen, who had become somewhat of a celebrity herself after the incident, read the letter over Murphy's shoulder. "Is he serious?" she asked. "Last week he wanted to put Officer Murphy on trial, and now he wants boxing lessons." Agent Wilson sighed and pulled up some photos on his tablet. They showed recent pictures from Pyongyang, where the angry protest signs had been replaced with huge portraits of Murphy throwing his punch. North Korean state TV was now calling it the punch of respect, and claiming their leader had deliberately tested American law enforcement. "According to our intelligence," Wilson explained, "Kim Jong-un hasn't stopped talking about the incident. He keeps telling his generals that none of them would have dared to punch him, even if they saw him causing trouble. He seems to think it shows some kind of American authenticity." Murphy looked at the letter again. The invitation wasn't just for him to visit. Kim wanted him to help train North Korean security forces in American-style direct intervention techniques. There would be a cultural exchange program, official ceremonies, and something called a friendship punch reenactment in front of 100,000 people. "This is crazy," Murphy said, running his hands through his hair. "I can't go to North Korea. I have a shift on Tuesday." Just then, the break room TV showed breaking news. Kim Jong-un had just given a speech in Pyongyang. The North Korean leader stood at a podium, a small bandage still visible on his jaw, speaking to a huge crowd. "America sends many diplomats with fancy words," the translator interpreted Kim's speech. But Officer Murphy spoke with actions. His punch carried more honor than 1,000 diplomatic meetings. The crowd cheered as Kim touched his bruised jaw with what looked like pride. The Secretary of State appeared on another news channel, looking much calmer than she had 3 days ago. "While we don't condone violence in law enforcement," she said carefully, "this unexpected situation has created a unique diplomatic opportunity." Murphy's phone buzzed again. His mother had texted, "Jimmy, if you go to North Korea, pack warm socks and don't drink the water." This was followed by 20 worried face emojis. The TV showed more footage from Pyongyang. Street vendors were selling T-shirts with Murphy's face on them. Children were playing a new game called Airport Police, taking turns pretending to punch each other. One restaurant had even named a sandwich after him, the Murphy Punch, extra spicy. Agent Wilson put a hand on Murphy's shoulder. "Look," he said, "I know this is weird, but think about it. When was the last time North Korea invited an American for anything other than propaganda or hostage negotiations? This could be important. Murphy looked around the break room, at Sarah giving him a thumbs up, at his fellow officers trying not to laugh, at the TV showing his face on North Korean t-shirts, and at the fancy invitation with its gold edges and important-looking stamps. "Do I at least get diplomatic immunity?" he asked weakly, in case he changes his mind about the whole punch of respect thing. The translator, who had finally stopped trembling every time he spoke, actually smiled. Supreme Leader says in letter, next time he visit America, he duck faster. The arrival of Officer James Murphy in Pyongyang was unlike anything the North Korean capital had ever seen. 10,000 people lined the streets, all holding signs with badly translated English messages like, "Welcome famous punch policeman," and "We love American law hitting." Murphy, sitting in a massive black limousine with bulletproof windows, couldn't believe how much his life had changed in just 2 weeks. He was wearing his regular police uniform, which Kim Jong-un had specifically requested. The only difference was a new pin on his collar, a gift from the Supreme Leader showing a fist with a friendship flag. "Your jaw feeling better?" Murphy asked Kim, who sat across from him in the limo. The translator, now much more relaxed around Murphy, conveyed the question. Kim touched his face, which still had a faint yellow bruise, and smiled. "Supreme Leader says his face will heal," the translator said, "but his respect for American directness will last forever." Kim then pulled out a tablet and excitedly showed Murphy something that made the police officer groan, a new video game called Airport Security Hero that was becoming popular in North Korea. In it, players could punch various troublemakers at an airport. The streets of Pyongyang were covered with banners showing the famous punch from every possible angle. North Korean artists had turned it into a dramatic painting style, making Murphy look like a muscular action hero instead of a middle-aged cop with a small beer belly. At the huge welcome ceremony in Kim Il-sung Square, Murphy had to demonstrate proper police takedown techniques to an audience of thousands. Kim Jong-un sat in a special chair, grinning and clapping as Murphy showed his security team how to safely subdue angry passengers without using excessive force. "Tell them the most important thing is to stay calm," Murphy explained to the group of North Korean security officers. "Angry people usually just want to be heard." When this was translated, the officers looked confused. Their usual method was to arrest anyone who showed the slightest sign of disobedience. Later that evening, at a fancy state dinner, Kim Jong-un made a surprising announcement through his translator. Supreme Leader has decided to reform North Korean airport security. No more automatic arrests. Instead, officers will learn American-style de-escalation techniques. The American diplomats present at the dinner nearly choked on their food. This was more progress than years of official negotiations had achieved. And it had all started with an accidental punch. Sarah Chen, who had been invited to join the cultural exchange as a civilian advisor, whispered to Murphy, "You know what's really crazy? The airline's customer service complaints have dropped by 50% since the incident. Apparently, nobody wants to risk getting punched by airport security anymore." The next day, Murphy found himself teaching a class to North Korean police officers. Through the translator, he explained basic concepts like reasonable force and public safety. The officers took detailed notes, though some looked uncertain about this new approach. "In America," Murphy explained, "we protect people first, even the ones causing trouble." When this was translated, 1 year after the punch that changed international relations, Officer James Murphy stood in his usual spot at JFK Airport's Terminal 4, watching travelers rush past. Everything looked the same, but everything was different. The spot where he had punched Kim Jong-un now had a small brass plaque on the floor that read, "On this spot in 2025, an unexpected incident led to unprecedented diplomatic progress." Tourists often took selfies with it, trying to recreate the famous punch pose. Murphy's life had changed in strange ways. He still worked his regular shifts at the airport, but now he also had a diplomatic passport and a direct phone line to Pyongyang. Every few months, he flew to North Korea to train their security forces. His mother still sent him texts before each trip. "Don't forget your warm socks." Today was special though. Kim Jong-un was making his first official visit to America since the incident. Murphy checked his watch. The North Korean leader's plane would land in 30 minutes. Sarah Chen, now promoted to Chief of Customer Relations, walked over with 2 cups of coffee. Nervous about seeing him again, she asked, handing Murphy a cup. On her uniform was a small pin showing a fist with a peace dove, the new symbol of Korean-American friendship. Nah, Murphy replied, though he touched his right fist unconsciously. Though I'm pretty sure the CIA has snipers on every roof just in case I get another funny idea. The terminal had been decorated with both American and North Korean flags. Airport staff wore special pins showing crossed flags of both nations. Even the coffee shop had created a special drink called the Diplomatic Punch, a mixture of American coffee and Korean red ginseng. When Kim Jong-un's plane landed, things were very different from last time. Instead of trying to hide his arrival, there was a full ceremony. The North Korean leader walked down the red carpet, smiling and waving. He had a new hairstyle, slightly more modern, though nobody dared to mention it. Murphy stood at attention as Kim approached. The supreme leader stopped in front of him, and everyone held their breath. Then Kim did something that made news photographers drop their cameras in shock. He held up his fists in a boxing pose and grinned. "Officer Murphy," he said in carefully practiced English, "this time I ready." The crowd laughed, and hundreds of phones recorded the moment. Even the Secret Service agents cracked smiles. Later, at a special ceremony in the terminal, Kim Jong-un gave a speech through his translator, the same one from last year, now much more confident. "1 year ago, American police officer taught me important lesson. Sometimes leadership means taking a punch, not giving orders." The speech was broadcast live in both countries. In North Korea, police training had completely changed. Officers were now taught to talk first and act later. Customer complaint rates at Pyongyang International Airport had dropped to record lows. Murphy had his own surprise for Kim. He presented the Supreme Leader with a special gift, a framed copy of his original incident report, which read, "Responded to customer service dispute. May have accidentally punched world leader. Request guidance on proper diplomatic protocol for this situation." Kim loved it so much he immediately posed for pictures with it. Photos of him holding the report while pointing at his long-heeled jaw went viral within hours. That evening, Murphy and Kim had coffee together in the same spot where they had first met. The terminal was quiet now, with just a few late-night travelers hurrying past. "You know what's funny?" Murphy said, as the translator conveyed his words. "I almost called in sick that day.